Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I have a theory for today's video. I think that the R6 is just as slow as an RC390 if you keep it under 8,000 RPM. Now, I know a lot of you street squids out there will be like, yes, Yami, we freaking told you the R6 is a great beginner bike. I started on one and I have no issues whatsoever. Well, hear me out, folks. I still think the R6 is a bad beginner bike, but for today's video, I wanted to scientifically prove if this motorcycle is as slow as a beginner bike if you keep it under 8,000 RPMs. Let's get into it. Today's video premise is very simple. We're gonna take both of these bikes out on the road. I'm gonna go with Nico, our intern, and we're gonna ride them back to back and see which one is gonna be faster when we keep the R6 under 8,000 RPM. Pretty straightforward. Now, these bikes are obviously very different, but I really think that by limiting the RPMs on the R6, they're gonna be a lot closer than you think. So we're gonna check out the specs on each of the bikes as it relates to acceleration, and then we're also gonna get them out on the road, and then we're gonna come back here and kind of walk through our conclusions and see how this all went down. Now remember, both of these bikes are giveaway motorcycles. Head over to shop.yaminoob.co. Every dollar you spend is an entry to win one of these fantastic motorcycles. If you wanna get entered to win both of them, I highly recommend you become an all giveaways member subscription over on shop.yaminoob.co. That's $22.50 a month, and that's the best way to get access to our Discord server, 10% off on the store, and 10% off on Twisted Road rentals as well. Hit that link down below and get started. Now, let's look at the specs and see what the hell we're even talking about today. So as silly as this idea sounds, it actually is founded in a little bit of science, and actually the numbers are pretty close. So let's take a look at the R6 first. So I drew a simple little dyno chart here of the R6. It makes about 120 wheel horsepower at 15,000 RPM, but for today's purposes, we are limiting it to 8,000 RPM via a handy dandy piece of tape and a little Sharpie that says, don't rev it over 8K. At 8,000 RPM, the bike is making 60 horsepower and 40 foot-pounds of torque. Now that's due to the fact that this is a race-derived engine. It's an inline 4, so actually at 8,000 RPM, you can see in the dyno, you really gotta rev the thing out to make all that power at the top end. So there is some merit to the idea that the R6 can be handled if you keep it under 8,000 RPM. We will see in today's video. Also, the R6 weighs 414 pounds or 188 kilograms wet and ready to ride when stock. So when comparing to the KTM RC390, it is quite a bit heavier by about 50 pounds or so. Now, the RC390 features a single cylinder engine, 373cc if I remember correctly, making 40 horsepower at 9,000 RPM with a peak torque of 25 foot-pounds. Because the RC390 today is not limited in how much it can rev out, we're using the max power figures throughout the rev range. So, you know, you look at these figures, 60 horsepower, 40 foot-pounds of torque, 40 horsepower and 25 foot-pounds of torque, a little bit lighter weight, a little bit heavier. In theory, these bikes should be pretty close. The gearing is gonna play a big effect into it as well. Obviously, the R6 can go for much longer than the RC390, typically topping out at about 150 miles per hour versus the RC390's 113 miles per hour, something like that. So we'll see if the gearing plays into effect in the acceleration of the two bikes for today. Now, with all that being said, there's nothing to it but to do it. Let's get these two bikes out on the road and see how they accelerate back to back.
All right, you ready? Damn it! I'm out of gears at 6th. It's so awkward to shift this thing so early. RC got hands, bro. That RC390 got hands. All right. 40. You ready? It's surprisingly close. Yeah, I'm just trying from the speed. I just got to do everything I can to keep up. All right. I went a little over on the revs there. I think I hit 85. I mean, I guess it is a beginner bike if you don't rev it to, you know, above 8 grand. But I think the problem is it's too tempting. It's way too tempting to just keep revving it out and just beat whoever you're riding against, you know? Yeah, I mean, it adds up, right? This bike weighs, I think, 410 pounds or so stock, wet and ready to ride. That bike weighs, I think, like 340 or something like that. It's a lot lighter. And at about 8,000 RPM, this is making 60 horsepower or so. So it makes sense that they're basically neck and neck, but I want to swap bikes and see how you feel on this versus that. All right, you ready? It's about to turn green. That's that lightweight. That's that lightweight, Nico. All right, Nico, I think we've gathered enough data to go back to the shop and form a final conclusion on whether or not the R6 is a beginner bike if you keep it under 8,000 RPM.
So what have we learned, folks? Well, both of these bikes are surprisingly close when you limit the R6 to 8,000 RPM. Now, both bikes, you can clearly tell, depending on which rider was on them, had a little bit of a different result. Nico is about 15 to 20 pounds lighter than I am, and so when he's on the bike, it's just going to accelerate a little bit better. But it really just depends on if you can really get the RC390 in the right gear at the right time and to really whack it wide open. I mean, it's kind of got some hands, if I'm being honest, so I was actually pretty surprised at how the RC accelerates. But I really think at the end of the day, the whole premise of today's video was, can you ride a 600 as a beginner if you keep it under 8,000 RPM? And I think the answer is no. Why is that? Because it's just simply too easy to just stay in the gear and stay in the power band a little bit longer and chase that demon a little bit every time, even as a beginner rider. And truthfully, it's just gonna get you in trouble when you're not really paying attention. If you were the most absolute controlled rider, then yes, you could keep this bike. Maybe if you found some way to literally limit it electronically or do an A2 throttle tube restriction like they do over in Europe on this motorcycle, maybe literally neuter it to 48 horsepower, then you could actually ride this as a beginner bike. But I really think it's a terrible idea to ride an R6 as a beginner bike with the intention of keeping it under 8,000 RPM. It's not like a modern leader bike where you could put it in D mode and then it literally is electronically restricted unless you change the mode. This bike is just a little too easy to just keep on the throttle and keep going fast. I hope you guys enjoyed today's look between these two motorcycles. What do you think? Let me know down below in the comments about these two machines back to back in their acceleration tests. Would you have done anything different? And by the way, these are both giveaway motorcycles. Check out shop.yamadoob.co and get entered to win both of these fantastic bikes. I would love if you became a member and joined me on our Discord server. I'm there every day hanging out, chatting with people, answering questions, and having a ton of fun. We'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later. Wow, look at all this. Can you believe this all around me? Man, I'm so happy to be here. Look at all this.